This took place about 10 years ago when I was a freshman in college. This is the first time I've recounted the story in full detail to anyone. I attended a college in a rural mountain area in the Northeast, a small school tucked away in the rolling hills, the type of place where the beauty and casual grace of nature is juxtaposed by the ugliness of humanity. The newspaper is ultra-conservative, and you couldn't sojourn too deeply into the woods beyond a few trees without seeing some trace of meth activity. You know, the type of place I mean. Anyway, one of my new friends from college discovered somehow an abandoned train trestle deep in the woods, about 5 miles from campus, in no man's land basically. I don't remember how he found this place, because it was very much off the beaten path. The trestle crossed above a river, which placidly flowed about 40 feet below. It was actually quite beautiful, and we began going there maybe 3 times a week, just chilling the trestle, watching the water below and the open sky above. We drank 40s there, smoked a bowl there, bring girls there. We began jumping off the trestle into the water below and then climbing back up. It was a very college-y thing to do, our chill spot basically. So one day I just needed to get away from the dorms and away from it all. I decided to go by myself to the trestle for a swim. It was about 7 p.m. so I still had a good hour or so of dim sunlight, and I brought a flashlight for the walk home when it was sure to be dark. I made the trek through pathways of the woods as I had done 100 times before, left my town flashlight on the truss and jumped into the water. The water was about 10 to 15 feet deep, I'd say. It flowed almost imperceptibly. You might as well be swimming in a stagnant pool. However, about 50 yards away from the trestle, and the current picks up significantly. Then about 20 yards after that, there is maybe 20-foot high waterfall that bubbles and splashes with extreme violence. We used to watch large objects go over and never come up again. So there I am dimly bobbing my head in and out of the water, doing underwater flips, etc. Pop my head out of the water. I happen to glance to the side of the river and see a man walking towards the water. The water is kind of impeding my view, so I didn't see him fluidly walking towards the water. The more I see him, the different stages of being closer to the water, like flipping through a flip book. He's 15 feet away, 10 feet away, 5 feet away. I can barely give you a description. Maybe 6 foot tall, pale, skinny, black hair pulled back in a ponytail. What I do remember most about his appearance was an extremely empty look on his face and in his eyes, like he was doing something mundane, talking out the trash or raking leaves. I'm treading water, not knowing what to think, and I see he's no longer beside the river. He has dove in and is swimming pin straight directly at me so fast. I try to swim the opposite way, but within a minute, I feel him grab my ankle and tug. I try to scream, but the water filled my mouth. While I'm underwater, he lets go and goes up for air, then goes back on and pulls me in. It seems like he's done this before, and I never once seen him after. He jumped in the water, he gradually pulling me where the current picks up before the waterfall. I started to realize this is just out. Kicking, screaming, cursing to no effect. Finally, I feel the current to take, and I twist away towards the waterfall. I look back and see this fucking guy just casually swimming back to where he jumped into the water, not even looking at me. This is by far the scariest moment of my life. As I approach the waterfall, long story short, I go over to and am underwater for a long time, over a minute, the water above pushing me under. The only reason I survived was there was a large log that had gone over. I grabbed it and leveraged it against the bottom, pushed me away from the crushing water. I survived obviously, but then I trekked to my dorm in the dark without my flashlight. Every step of the way I walked thinking he would come back to finish the job. The next year, football played drowned going over that fall. The news said it was because there was extreme issue due to recent rainfall, but I've always wondered about that.
Some quick background leading up to the night in question. I'm graduating from a university tomorrow, so I was determined to get an early night. I got around to my friend's house for a wee spliff. But don't get me wrong, I'm not a pothead. It was more of a celebration anyway. I remembered I had to take my mom to the hospital. Nothing serious, but she had to be taken and picked up. Then I remembered we rolled the joint in the car. Disaster, she'd smell and see it everywhere. So I made a mental note to stop and vacuum the car. We have a 24-hour petrol station really close to us, but it's sort of on its own as there is no houses or buildings around. I pulled in and looked over to the shop. They use a hatch after 12 and don't allow you inside. But I didn't need anything. It had just ticked over 4 a.m. and I had to be up at 10. So I wanted to just get this done and get out of here. The vacuum machine was behind the coal shed, but it was very well lit. I cranked on some music on my phone and got to work. 1 pound for 4 minutes of vacuuming, not bad, I thought. No one else was in the parking lot except for one white van, but the guy inside was yelling wildly into his phone. Not loudly, just making a lot of gestures. I felt for him. Probably some guy who's been driving all night. But hey, I cranked on with the work at hand. Then I looked over again and caught his eye. He looked away and I laughed. Love at first sight, I thought to myself. I was in an amazing mood. Then it started to get weird. The summer sun was already starting to rise, and the streetlights went out, including those illuminating the petrol station. It wasn't that dark, but it was noticeably creepier, and I was keen to really get a move on. I stared over at the van and saw the man watching me again, still talking on his phone. But then something happened that I really freaked out at. I saw someone lean forward from the other seat and peek around the guy, then immediately slam themselves back against the seat. That's when I noticed the guy on the phone was the passenger and wasn't driving. I hadn't noticed this when I drove in, but I shrugged it off and set the vacuum cleaner back, ready to leave. I threw all my stuff back into my car and went to unlock the door when a voice said, "Excuse me." I swear I nearly shot myself there and then. My heart was absolutely pounding, but I recognized the voice. The petrol station was a Spar, the same chain of stores I work in, and the guy who'd spoken was my old supervisor. He'd moved to the 24-hour store not too long ago. He began to shout at me for using the vacuum so late at night. The two guys in the van just sat there watching us as if waiting for him to go away. Then he said something to me that made my whole situation real. "I'm going to have to ask you to come inside. We aren't allowed to allow customers in past 11, even in a store that is open until 12. This is a big no-no, especially as I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong." I allowed him to lead the way, and the moment we were in the store he put down the shutters. He told me that he'd been watching the guys in the van, and they'd been sitting there for nearly 3 hours. Little did I know my old supervisor saw someone get out of the back of the van, and as he described it, put a bit of masking tape across a few digits in the number plate, effectively creating a new one. I began to panic. Looking outside, I noticed the van was gone. After checking the CCTV, it was shown that they sped away the minute I was taken into the store. We called the police and they examined the little footage there was. Immediately they took the tape and thanked us for bringing it to their attention. At one moment on the CCTV, the guy who got out of the back of the van turned to get back in, and it looked like he had a knife in his hand. I realized the sound's dramatic, and the story isn't exactly thrilling, but I cannot imagine what would have happened if my old supervisor hadn't been looking out for me. I'm never vacuuming at 4 a.m. anymore, that's for sure. during the midsummer, usually around the middle of July, me and a couple of my good friends, Kevin, Ryan, and Tommy, all the way up through my childhood, always made time to go up to my friend's family cabin, way up north in the forest of Minnesota. The cabin is located on Vermilion Lake. Throughout all of our young years, we would always go, for sure accompanied by my friend's dad, Kevin's dad who owned the cabin, and sometimes a few of our dads as well. Once we were juniors in high school, we felt mature and old enough to go up to the cabin on our own, finally without Kevin's dad or any adult supervision that may have accompanied us. I would like to mention a little information in regards to my friend's cabin to help you picture the scenario. My friend's cabin is very remote, and very little is based upon a very large-sized island. Other cabins were on the island, but the next one closest to us was a solid quarter or half-mile away, at least, which is my best guess, which you could get to by taking a man-made path around the island. And I want to mention that to get to my friend's cabin, you had to park on a gravel road on the opposite side of the island, as his cabin was on an island, and you had to take a boat across the lake, about a half a mile to reach the cabin. This lake is huge. My mind always had a tendency to run around while sleeping there, throughout all my young years, for it was all one level, with only 2 bathrooms next to one another, a kitchen/living room, connected, and a bathroom in the back of the cabin. And where you slept in the cabin was there always at least one window in each room with no curtains at all. So it was very easy to see outside to the woods and lake. And this is where my mind would always run, as I always thought someone was peering in. Of course, nobody ever was. I had been at this cabin a dozen times throughout my lifespan. Nothing had ever happened. And the older I got, the easier it got to sleep. Now for the event. We would usually stay a week's worth, or 4 or 5 nights. On the 3rd night, during the trip, when we were all finally on our own, we set up a campfire and I've been drinking beers all night. I don't condone underage drinking, by the way. We just happened to sneak some, being the rebels we are. We were out at the dock to gaze up at the magnificence of the stars and enjoy our buzz, when all of a sudden we heard something out on the water. That sounded like a fish jumping out to catch a bug. We quickly looked out to the lake, with curiosity wondering where the splash came from, having our poles ready 24/7. Thankfully the moon was out that night, which helped lit up the lake. Otherwise it would be dark as black, with there being no city lights for miles upon miles, and we would not have been able to see the lake. One of my friends, Ryan, began to point out, saying, what the hell is that? After looking closely and finally spotting what he was pointing at, all I could describe it as was simply looked like a head out in the middle of the lake, just floating about, staring at us directly. It was about 3/4 worth of a football length away, out in the lake from the dock. There was no questions that I could see its features. It had long hair and very palish skin like a face, but couldn't make out any of the eyes, nose, or mouth, or chin, as it was just a blob of pale skin with long black hair over it. I'll never forget the feeling that came over me. The hairs on my legs, neck, arm all stood up, and I was paralyzed on the inside, ready to leave that moment. But we told ourselves it was just a loon, as these birds are very popular night drifters on the lake, and do their hunting late, and also have black with white colors on their coats, and hunt by diving deep into the water, holding their breath up to minutes sometimes. So it was possible that a loon all of a sudden popped up in the water after hunting a bit, or at least we tried to talk ourselves into that scenario. All of us having the creeps and noticing it wasn't moving one bit, just treading in the water at the same pace. We went back into our campfire and lit it brighter, and headed in to drink more. I would like to mention that there was also a staircase outside my friend's cabin, about 8 stairs in length down to the bottom, where the fire pit was and the dock. We soon forgot about the head with the help of some beers, until I had to use the bathroom really bad, and one inside was preoccupied. I just went outside to do my business, since we were in the great outdoors. When I had to take a pee and glanced at the beautiful moonlit lake, I noticed that the black circle object was still there, but about 30 yards closer, still staring as if it was staring right at me. I could easily see its nose and its face now. It was very pale, like it hadn't seen the sun in years. A very, very uneasy feeling came over me, and I immediately went inside to tell my friends to come and take a quick look, keeping my eyes glued on it from the door to the cabin. We came outside to see it was still looking at us, as if its head was cocked up at us, with its chin in the air. Nobody dared to go out to the dock anymore, and we eventually went back inside, ruling out that it wasn't a loon, because a loon would have treaded in the water in the same spot. Eventually the current would have drifted it somewhere else in a rocking manner. For a loon to stay in the same spot for almost an hour or two made no sense to any of us. This head was like an object, was stiff as a board, and not moving a single muscle, just staring at us from the dock instead. There was no ripple effect at all in the lake from the object. We said it was just a log and went back in. I could tell everyone was uneasy too. A few hours would pass. It was super late into the night at this point and knew that we needed some sleep. Being my curious self, I looked back outside once more and the black object had completely vanished. I could help but feel a sense of relief, thinking that the log must have floated off or hit shore somewhere. As we slept with no windows open that night, there was no AC in the cabin and we had to open them, otherwise we would have fried in this cabin with being the middle of summer. Me and my other buddy, Tommy, slept in the living room, while the other two slept in 2 separate bedrooms with their doors open. Not being able to sleep, but keeping my eyes peeled shut, I began to hear someone walking around at the bottom of the stairs to the cabin, around the campfire at the bottom of the stair. I thought I was about to shit bricks. No question what or whoever I heard down there. It was on the dock now, pacing back and forth as it made the sound of a boot clicking on the wood. It was as if it wasn't sure what to do with themselves. It lasted for about 3 minutes. Wanting to whisper to my buddy but frozen in fear, I just kept my eyes shut and my ears on full alert. The footsteps sounded like they took 2 steps up the deck stairs all of a sudden, but then turned around and sounded like they sprinted down the man-made path. After it sounded like the steps were long gone, and a couple of minutes had passed, I woke up Tommy asking if he heard the footsteps, both of us sitting up. I was startled to see my friend Ryan walking out of his room and saying, "We need to leave," after these steps had vanished. He must have heard us talking, so he felt like he could come out as well. But either way, he was waking us up regardless. Something was very disturbing about his expression, and I asked him, why? He woke up my other friend Kevin in the other room and said, "Let's go, get to the boat, it's time to go." Asking him, what, Ryan, what the hell is wrong with you? He explained to us quickly while grabbing his stuff, and I will never forget what he explained, as won't my other friends. He said when he was turning on his side of his bed to get more comfortable, he saw someone peeking in at the top right corner of his window, and it quickly shifted out of view. He said all he saw was one eye, ghostly white skin, and long black hair down the window. Again, another thing I would like to add. When we look back at what he was experiencing, it chills us to the bone realizing that since his face was in the top right corner of the window in his room, this thing had to be damn near 8 feet tall, standing on something like bricks trying to peek in, or was floating. Ryan then continued to say, "Let's fucking go," very seriously. Absolutely disturbed the fuck out of my mind and feeling like I was going to be sick. And then telling them what my friend and I heard in the living room, we all agreed to pack up our stuff and book it out of there. We locked up as we headed down the stairs and saw bare footprints in the dirt, heading off into the path around the cabin. We picked up our staff getting onto the boat, not knowing what was watching us or around us. Threw our stuff and untied and sped off. I didn't even think about the head in the water anymore, or to look in the water, thank God. My eyes were just glued to the cabin trying to spot anything moving, but I saw nothing. When we finally got our stuff packed in the car, boat tied up, and we hopped in the car and took off. We had been driving out about 10 miles, and out of the blue, Ryan, who said he saw the person outside his window, all of a sudden broke down in the car saying, "What was it, guys? What the fuck did I see?" We called our parents to tell them what happened on our way back and told them that Ryan was freaking out, and they told us to get home safely and quickly. It was late, about 4 or 5 in the morning, but no one slept, and it was a very quiet ride home. My friend's dad, who owns the cabin, went up the following weekend and said he experienced nothing while there, but he did mention bare footprints were still lingering around. He thought it was odd because someone was walking around his property and bugged him badly. Whatever Ryan saw in the window really hit him hard. After his breakdown, he had trouble sleeping multiple nights and ended up seeking help for a couple of weeks. He also hopped on some sleeping medications. As time went by, he ended up being fine, but still isn't comfortable sleeping next to a window without a curtain. I to this day cannot explain what happened and why it seemed to happen to us, and cannot explain what I saw in the lake, and what Ryan specifically saw. Nothing has ever happened to the cabin since that night, or so we're told. I personally have decided never to go back to the cabin, which really makes me sad because I had a really fun childhood memories there. Tommy and Kevin have gone back and been fine, but Ryan refuses to go back, and I'm with him. A lot of people have cabins on this island, so it could have been a prank that was in the making that got busted when Ryan saw the person in the window. Or the person possibly wanted to do something worse. I will never be able to explain what was floating in the lake, but the fact that the incident, along with the bare footprints and someone looking at Ryan's window at night, all happened in the same night, seems more than a coincidence. Sometimes when I'm going to sleep, I like to keep track of how weird my thoughts get right before actually falling asleep. Usually within a few minutes before I conk out, my thoughts are just a bunch of non sequiturs, stuff that doesn't make sense, but it's sort of fun to listen in. A year ago I was going through a pretty bad time. My girlfriend just dumped me for another guy, work was terribly stressful, and I only found a new apartment a couple days before my lease was up, and I had to move out. A day or two before I moved, all my stuff was moved out, and I just had an air mattress in the living room because my bedroom had no lights and felt really empty. I was falling asleep and paying attention to how weird my thoughts were getting. Nothing too strange, just a bunch of random thoughts and phrases popping through my head. When all of a sudden, clear as a bell, I heard what sounded like a voice just a few feet away from me. I remember him saying, "Well, fuck it. Just cut him open. Oh fuck, he can hear us." In a flat, monotone voice. I snapped up, of course, and there was nobody there. It was just a creepy auditory hallucination, but it felt absolutely real for a few seconds, which made it all worse by how strange my home felt at that moment. Okay, long story. When I was 19, I moved out of my parents' house and got an apartment. It was in a relatively safe neighborhood, but still affordable. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, very modest and nothing fancy. Anyway, I was on the 2nd floor, above a man who couldn't hear anything, and below a couple in their early 20s who fought and screamed all the fucking time. And when they weren't fighting, they took turns having loud, obnoxious sex in the wee hours of the morning. One day, the boyfriend gets violent, the cops take him away. The girl continues living there, but she comes down to me to let me know that he's gone, and because I was a relatively big guy then, she said he's not supposed to come by, but can I have your number in case he does? This was before cell phones, so I gave it to her. I should mention that I have a girlfriend, Sue. at this time, and she did not like upstairs girl Jen. Anyway, Jen calls me one night right before midnight. "Are you okay?" I ask. "Yeah, what are you doing?" she asks. "Getting to bed. I work at 7. I work early." "Wanna come and fuck me?" she says, very direct. I have a girlfriend, Jen. I'll talk to you later." 2 hours later, she calls me up and wakes me. She's crying. "Why don't you think I'm attractive? Why don't you want to fuck me? I saw your girlfriend and she's fat. Why don't you want to fuck me? I swear I won't tell anybody, but you have to break up with her. It won't work. She doesn't love you like I do." Keep in mind, all these words came out at lightning speed, and she was drunk. She just kept prattling on like that. I couldn't get in a word edgeways. Finally, I ended up hanging up on her. 30 seconds later, she's banging on my door. I decide to ignore it. She keeps yelling. It's almost 2 a.m. She's screaming, crying, banging on the door. I do the only thing I could. I call the police. They say it'll be 45 minutes. It took them an hour, and she was banging on the door and screaming and crying for the entire hour. They take her back to her apartment and calm her down. An officer takes a statement. He keeps asking, "Was she ever in this apartment?" and questions like that. At no point did you allow her to enter the premises. She'd never ever been inside my place. She told the cops a very different story, that we'd been intimate, and I kicked her out in the middle of sex without her keys or her wallet. I told the cop he was free to search. He looked around for about 10 minutes, seemed satisfied, and then thanked me and left. At this point, it's near 4 a.m. 4:30 rolls around and she calls me and wakes me up again. She's apologizing, she's crying, she's so sorry that she got like that, but she just misses him so much. At this point, I tell her I think it's a bad idea that we talk anymore. I tell her I understand how hard it is, but I'm going to miss work and I can't afford to miss a day's pay. She seems to get that and hangs up. I go to work after getting maybe 2 hours of sleep in total. I'm a total zombie all day. I get home at 4:30, ready to crash. Sue, my girlfriend, was going to bring dinner by after she got off work at 8. I had 4 hours or so to sleep. My apartment is completely spotless. Somebody came in and cleaned it. Better yet, they vacuumed, and I don't even own one yet. There are freshly made cookies on the table. Sue must have gotten off early, I think. "Sue," I said. I walk into the bedroom. There, of course, is Jen. Naked except for high-thigh socks and a hair tie. She's lying on her back, and as I come in, she pulls her knees back to her shoulders, smiles at me, and says, "Shove your fucking cock in me until I cry." I just turn around and run out of my own apartment, scared like a little boy. I would have ran all the way to the office, but I was in terrible shape, so I walked. In the lobby, I called the police again. They came and arrested her. Charged her with some minor things like breaking and entering or trespassing, I forget which. And she spends a couple nights in jail since her parents or friends didn't bail her out. Behavior like this happens for weeks. I have some friends stay at my house, including Sue during this time, so I'm never alone because I'm worried she's crazy and might do something weird. She's constantly knocking on the door and arguing with the people staying at my place. She offers to share me with Sue, offers to go down on Sue, then eventually tries to get Sue to leave me and move in with her, and they'll be like a lesbian Bonnie and Clyde. A week or two later, she's being evicted. I guess they were late on rent already by like 2 months, and the eviction had begun. And as some for weird protest, she paints her upper torso and face bright pink with some type of body paint, and wears a green bikini top as they drag her kicking and screaming out of the place. Police ended up arresting her again for something. My 6 months lease is up and I'm uncomfortable with her knowing where I live. So I move, I get an unlisted address and number. I am about 10 miles away from my old place. A couple months after I move, there's a knock at the door on a Saturday afternoon. It's Jen. She followed me from work during the week, then waited until Sue left and now wanted to apologize. She says she's medicated, she wanted to apologize. I tell her I can't let her in, and that she needs to leave. I tell her I hope that she's better, but I can't let her in. Predictably, she goes nuts. Another call to the cops as I lean on my own door to keep her from pushing it in. Another arrest. For a while I didn't hear from her. 6 months, a year. I moved 3 states away, break up with Sue unrelated to this, and I was single again. It's been about 3 to 4 years and I suddenly get a MySpace friend request from her. I ignore it. Then I get a tirade of emails, long-winded, lacking punctuation, stream of consciousness, clearly mental ill. I just ignore them. What else can I do? This is about 2002. It dies down a bit. 2005, I hear back from her on Facebook. Same thing, I ignore it again. 2006, Sue messages me out of the blue. I haven't talked to her in like 8 years. She says Jen came into her work and wanted info on me. Where I was, what I was doing. She was dragged out by security. 2008, Jen finds my little brother's Facebook while he's in college. Makes a road trip across 3 states to find him at school. Finds him at his dorm and goes to talk to him. He has no idea who she is. She threatens him. He and 2 of his friends kick her out of the dorm. He calls me, I explain. He calls the cops, they do nothing. 6 months later, she accosts him at work, a bar. His boss, a female, punches her square in the mouth during a fight to get her out of the building, and Jen loses 2 teeth. She sues the bar. The owner countersues, and Jen is found mentally incompetent and placed under a form of mental hold in a facility. 2012. Jen is out of the mental illness facility and heavily medicated. Her counselor contacts me on Facebook. Would I like to help her put her past behind her, she asks. She wants to set up a face-to-face. I have a wife, I have a kid, I say no thank you. The counselor gets very frustrated and tells me I'm a terrible person. 2013, Jen commits suicide by jumping off a cliff somewhere in Arizona. Her body is found months after the fact and identified by the contents of her wallet. Part of me wonders what I did to cause this. I literally never did anything out of the ordinary or said anything out of the ordinary to her. I was just her downstairs neighbor for a couple of months by the time this started, and it caused over a decade of fixation. Mental illness is a hell of a thing. I took in a puppy a few months ago. Her original owners weren't able to bond with her. Said she was unresponsive and disobedient and didn't have the look they wanted. I've got no idea what they were talking about. She's the best behaving dog I've ever had. And she's downright adorable. So I'm used to people stopping in the street so they can pet her. Usually people will ask before they touch her. Or at the very least, they'll say something like, "Oh my god, look at your dog," to let me know they're obviously gonna come over and say hi to her. I'm pretty much fine with that. What I'm not fine with is what happened one evening. I live in a tiny seaside town, one of those places where the location is beautiful, but the locals are racist. And I kind of take the dog on a tour of all the areas closest to the sea when I walk her. We'll walk along the beach, down the promenade, around the miniature lakes, and then home. Probably not the smart to stick with the same route every day, but I've switched things up since then. Anyway, we're at the final stage of our walk, making a couple laps around the lakes, when we walk past a man. Now, a lot of old men gather there on a regular basis. I didn't think much of it. One dude sitting on a bench by the water. I told myself he was staring because my dog was cute. I just passed him by. And then from behind me, I hear him say, "Sit." and my dog, who was much more obedient than her previous owners let on, sits down and looks up at me all happy, excited for a treat. I frown back at the guy, see that he's still on the bench, and I quickly encourage my puppy to start walking again. We haven't even gotten 5 feet further down the path before the guy says, "Sit." And my dog does. I turn around already glaring and see the man's now on his feet. I tell my dog to keep walking and pick up my pace, trying to get over the path that leads up to the main street. We're still nowhere near the path when the man yells, "Sit." And my dog does. She's staring at me, looked confused, but I'm pretty much terrified. He's coming over to us, and he's catching up fairly quickly. He's close enough to where, even without my glasses, I can tell he's grinning. At that point, I've had enough. I forgot about getting onto the path. I just scooped my dog off the ground and ran up the hill, and climbed over a little fence that separates the lake from the street. The man didn't follow, but stayed at the bottom of the hill looking at us, not smiling anymore. I'd never seen him before, and I haven't seen him since, and I hope it stays that way. I don't exactly know what his intentions were, but it seems to me like he was using my dog's obedience to slow me down, to keep me from getting away from him. So I doubt they were good. Glad I didn't stick around to find out.
So for some context, sometime in late 2019, I started seeing someone. We call him Shu. Shu seemed nice enough and was generally what appeared to be somewhat normal. He kept insisting we move in together despite dating for only a few months, and the fact that I already own a house, that should have been enough to tell me to run, but no, I didn't. Shu started showing up at my house late at night without announcing himself or asking to be invited. At first it wasn't too bad, but it became nightly. Then he started the lying for attention, even going as far to claim a close friend had died. No, a close friend had not died. He'd show up drunk and demanding attention and refuse to follow my house rules. If I didn't let him in, he'd refuse to leave. Long story short, Shu's behavior kept getting worse and worse, showing up drunk from being at the bars all night during COVID, demanding my attention despite knowing I'm high risk. He tried one last time to get into my home, and I cut it off right there. Told him to leave me alone. The next morning I got a call at 5 a.m. to come into work on my day off. I was annoyed, but agreed. Then the calls started non-stop. I'd tell him to leave me alone and hang up again and again. When it was time to leave for work, I assumed it was my boss calling me to tell me he was here to pick me up. It wasn't. It was Shu. "Well, your boss is here for you." Sure enough, 7 a.m. and he was camped out on my porch and tried to grab me in broad daylight in front of my boss. This kind of behavior went on for nearly a week. My employees refused to let me walk home after he started showing up at my place of work at closing time and would try to cut me off when trying to get into my house. Found out he kept calling because he could hear my phone ringing through the thin walls of my old home, trying to locate exactly where I was. Every day, I'd have upward of 20 phone calls and 50 text messages. I finally called the police after he threatened that I was too poor for a restraining order. The cop drew the line right there and took it as a direct threat to my well-being. When I got home that day, I noticed cigarette ash all over my porch. A hole burnt into my patio chair. Soon after, I found a window in my basement forced open with a surgical mask on the floor. I told my roommate and my neighbors what had been going on and gave a description of Shu and to be on the lookout. Things quieted down, and after a few months, the phone calls from a VPNs had finally stopped. I was in the car with my housemate earlier this week, and I mentioned a smudge of the garage door. He parks in front of the garage, not in it. When he told me, yeah, I think a homeless guy was squatting in there for a while, probably weeks. I found a bunch of clothes in there and then they disappeared a couple weeks ago. My heart dropped into my stomach. I noticed tracks in the snow, big for my housemate to have left. But thought, no way, couldn't be. I was shoveling snow all through the night for my neighbors all winter, and he was literally within arm's reach of me, able to see directly into the windows of my house. And yes, I scolded my housemate. I get that he is a guy and doesn't really get it when a woman says he's dangerous. Call the cops if anything weird happens around the house. But come on, man. Shoo, I know you're still around. Let's not meet again for your sake.
I'm an overnight security guard for a large building/parking ramp. It's generally a really quiet job, with a lot of free time, but occasionally I do have to kick out some homeless people. It's a horrible part of the job, and I do my best to direct them to the safest place to sleep. Most people are understanding, as they unfortunately go through this a lot. If anything, they want to vent, and I try to be an open ear. Our protocol is to ask them to leave, and if all else fails, we have to contact police. I've only once gotten to that last step. It's important to note my general routine at work. I sit in a shack in the parking ramp for an hour. Then I go for a walk around the building, and then back to the shack. The doors are all locked, but there is an entryway with an ATM that's open 24/7. This is where I find people looking for a place to sleep. For more context, I'm a smaller woman, unarmed. On this night, there was a woman trying to sleep by the ATM. I followed the protocol, and after the first 2 warnings, I contacted the police. She yelled at me, which is out of normal, but understandably considering her position. It must be frustrating to be constantly kicked out of every semi-safe place. Police arrived, and, be I a little scared, I always am, I watched from the inside of the building out of view to make sure they got her out. If she was yelling at me, she was full of screaming at them. This goes on for about a half hour. Before she leaves the building, unfortunately, that's all the cops are required to do. So she makes her way out to the bus stop. The problem with this bus stop is parallel to my shack. She just sits and stares at me, with hatred in her eyes. This gets uncomfortable pretty quickly, so I decide to take another walk. When I'm passing the door that leads out to my shack, I decided to peek out the little window in the door. I don't usually do this, but I felt uneasy knowing she was probably still in the area, and it's a good thing I did. I can just barely see it, but behind my shack, I see the slightest wobble. There she was, hiding right behind my shack. It's not a big thing, maybe a 10-foot cube made of windows and metal. Right at the entrance of the parking ramp, I have no doubt she was waiting for me. I call the police and just keep watching from the little window. While I'm waiting, she eventually lets out an angry scream, kicks the malicious junk in front of my shack, and storms up the stairwell in the parking ramp. For an extra kick of anxiety, the floor above me had a broken door that wasn't locked at the time. Eventually police get there, and after some harsh words, they get her to leave again, and this time she walks off into the night. What really scared me was what I found on my next walk. There's a mirror next to the door I was watching her from. I couldn't see it from inside, but from this side it was obvious she had broken the mirror with a large piece missing. Maybe I've allowed my anxiety to build all this up in my head, but from my perspective, she had taken a large sharp object, hid behind my shack, and waited for me to walk up. You tell me if I'm overreacting, but to my nameless potential assailant, I wish you better times and a bed to sleep in, but I also hope we never meet again.
So I was about 13, 14 when this happened. I had been in a really dark place mentally, and I met this guy through Tumblr. He told me his name was John, and he thought I was really pretty and ran a cool Tumblr. He used pictures of this super generic emo guy, and my tween heart was hooked. We'd talk for days and nights, and at one point I told him the town I lived in. Because my parents worked late, I'd get home from school and usually be by myself at home, and I'd sit in the living room, which had this big window facing the street. If you looked in, you could see people and the TV and stuff, and I always kept the curtains open for light. So about 2 weeks after John and I were talking, I noticed this white sedan drive slowly past my house, at least once a day, usually right after I got home from school. I also noticed that whenever I was watching something and texting John, he'd find a way to bring the show into conversation. I didn't think much of it at first because usually it was shows I'd reblogged on my page before. That was until I started watching Pretty Little Liars on ABC Family. I hadn't posted or reblogged anything about the show, and then John started bringing it up, and I thought it was really weird. When I asked him about it, he said I just seemed like the type of girl who watched it, so I dropped the issue. Fast forward 2 weeks, and I'm with some friends at a nearby park. I wasn't having a good day, so we decided to hang out and do photo shoots or whatever. So we're walking around, and I turn my head, and boom, there's that white sedan, except it's closer, and I can see the person in it. It's this older guy, maybe in his 20s, just watching us. I got really uncomfortable, but didn't bring it up. And then my friend suggested we go to the playground, which was right next to the parking lot. But at this point, none of my friends knew about this issue, and I wanted to seem cool, so I went along with it. We dicked around on the playground for a bit when I noticed the guy in the white sedan get out of his car and walk toward us. My middle school brain is trying to rationalize that this can't be the same sedan that kept sitting outside and driving past my house. And maybe the guy was just watching his kid or something. I wish that were the case. I went over to the water fountain to grab a drink, and the guy comes up to me. "Hey there." Hi? "You're," he said my Tumblr handle, "right?" My blood went ice cold. Yeah, who are you?" He smiled at me, this really wide grin. "I'm John. I came to see you in person. You told me the town you lived in and how you wish we could meet." "Listen, I gotta get back to my friends." No. Why don't we take a drive? We can go to McDonald's." He grabbed my arm at this point, and I think one of my friends had noticed because she came up to us and the John guy released me and started to back up. "Hey, Lizzie, Mom says we gotta head home. Dad's home and he had a long day." I nodded along and walked away with her, my whole group of friends crowding me as we headed back to my house. I never told my parents what happened that day, and none of my friends did either. None of us wanted our Tumblrs exposed, and we thought we'd get in trouble for what happened, even though I was the only one at risk. When we got home, I blocked John and reported the account, thanking my friends for saving me. It's scary to think what could have happened if they hadn't been there. And I don't think the story would have had a happy ending.
It all started with a normal day at work. I worked at a small grocery store at the time, and my duties consisted of gathering shopping carts in the parking lot and bagging groceries. Normal minimum wage stuff. It was rainy that morning, and of course, I was assigned to carts all day. About 2 hours into my shift, I saw a man rushing to get his groceries into his car. It was pouring. I ran over to him and started to help him with his bags. "It's pouring," I said. "Mind if I help you get out of the rain?" "Yes, thank you so much." As he was closing his trunk, he looked at me. With a very surprised look on his face, he lowered his eyebrows and looked me up and down and smirked. Are you a new hire? No, I've been here for a couple months. Oh, you are very pretty. He said it in a weirdly sensual tone. Thank you. Have a good day. I shut it down. I'm not interested. As I was walking back to the store, I hid until he left. I could feel him watching me while I walked away. Nevertheless, I continued to work, not really thinking about it. After my lunch, I was at a register bagging groceries and I noticed the same man from earlier walk in. I pretended I didn't see him and just kept bagging. He came up to the register and got a single chocolate bar. I didn't give him a bag. He stands towering over me and says, "Aren't you going to bag my item?" "Oh, sorry. I didn't know you wanted a bag for one thing." I put his chocolate bar into a bag and told him have a good day. "When are you off work, sweetheart?" "Oh man, I'm not comfortable giving you my information." He returned with, "That's okay. You've been working here for what, 5 hours? You probably get off around 6 or 7, right?" He smiled, winked at me, and walked away. Disgusted, I went to my manager and told her what had happened. She told me not to work the lot anymore and to ask someone to walk me to my car. So by the end of my shift, I had a male coworker walk me to my truck, and we scanned the parking lot. Looking through this man's car, we didn't see him, so my coworker went back inside and I started my truck. I called my mom to tell her what had happened, and once she answered, I left the parking lot. Literally the second I turned into the road, I saw his car pull onto the road behind me. I told my mom I thought he was going to follow me, and she told me to just drive around a bit until you lose him. I drove around for about 20 minutes just going in circles around my town. I hit a red light and he pulled up next to me and started yelling something to me. His open window, I of course pretended he wasn't there, but I could still hear what he was saying. "You would bear some good kids for me. You'd make a great slave for me, little lady." He then started being very explicit about what he was going to do to me if he caught me. I told my mom that I was going to call 911, and if I wasn't home in an hour, call the police. The man speeds ahead of my truck and starts brake checking me. Frantic, I waited for the closest intersection and turned up the block. My phone fell under the seat while I was turning, and I decided to go to the nearest open establishment and run in and hide and have someone call 911. The closest open business I could find was a convenience store at a gas station. I pulled in, parked, and ran in for my life into the store. I tell the clerk what is happening. She takes me to the break room and locks me in there. While processing that I might have survived this ordeal, I hear the door of the storefront start violently rattling, and before I knew it, the clerk was locking herself in the break room too. She was on the phone with the police, and they were on their way. We were silent, cowering in the dark room. I found myself feeling guilty for wrapping another woman into this fear. My thoughts were racing through my head. I said to him, "Did I lead him on?" "No. I just told him have a good day." Has he been following me for longer than tonight? How did he know what car I drove? Are the police going to get here in time? Are we going to die? Finally, the small room is illuminated by red and blue lights from the crack under the door. We hear a voice over the intercom telling us it's safe and to come out. Shaking, the clerk takes out her keys and opens the door. We walk out and give our statements. After the police leave, I turn to my unexpected savior and profusely thank her. We cry, hug, and she walks me to my car. The next night I went back and bought her some food and an Amazon gift card. I have been in a nearly fatal car accident 10 feet away from a mountain lion in the wild, and I am a survivor of sexual assault. I can tell you with total honesty, I thought that was the end of my line. Stay aware, be cautious, and stay safe. In 2011, I was a sophomore in high school and was hanging out with my friend Hadley. We live in the Rust Belt, and the population of our area has declined a lot since the last 40 to 50 years. So schools were merged as a result of declining enrollment, which means there's a lot of abandoned schools. I lived in a small town on the Pennsylvania-Ohio border, and the abandoned school was a hotspot for teenagers who wanted to smoke weed and break windows and just overall cause havoc. My friend and I were in a breezeway type area. You could just step right over a 1-foot wall because all the glass had been broken out. All of a sudden, a guy comes around the corner and grabs my friend, telling her to come with him. We think it's a guy intending to call the cops, so we book the fuck out of there and walk to my cousin's house down the street. It is the day before my aunt's birthday. Also, it was a supermoon that day. So all my family is at my cousin's house, and we hang out with them for a bit. They all ended up going out to eat, but my cousin Hadley and I stayed back at the house. It's now dark outside. We are sitting on my cousin's stoop and smoking cigarettes, when all of a sudden we see the man walking down my cousin's driveway from the direction of her garage, not the direction of the street. And he has his coat pulled over his mouth and his hat pulled down to his eyes, so only his eyes and nose are visible, and he's making a strange gesture at us. At first glance, I thought he was just jangling his keys at us, so my dumbass thinks it's our uncle trying to give us his house keys, and I walk up to him and my cousin says, "Jake, get the fuck away from him." And now I'm a little bit closer and can see what he's doing. He is masturbating. We turn around, run around the house to the front door. The door at the stoop was literally never ever used, and was blocked with a bunch of shit because it opened up to the storage room. And we thankfully get inside. The guy gets to the front door after us and finishes all over the side glass door, and then runs back towards her garage into the woods. We are fucking freaking out. We call the cops. They ask us some questions and then leave. About a week later, a girl had graduated from our high school, heard about what happened, and remembers seeing a car parked on the street behind my cousin's garage, and had taken down the license plate number. She reports the number to the police, and it's registered to an Ohio man, so not much is done. And then a few weeks later, this same car chases a woman home from Walmart in Youngstown, and attempts to follow her inside and rape her. He's arrested. Turns out he had a habit of trying to sexually assault people in Walmart parking lots. He faced charges in both states, and my cousin, friend, and I were all subpoenaed to testify against him. When we go to court, we see his mugshot, and the guy who had masturbated and chased us was the fucking guy who grabbed my friend in the abandoned school. He wasn't gonna call the cops. He was gonna try to rape her. He got a few years in prison, but I believe he got out in like 2015 or 2016. So yeah, let's not meet. I was having lunch with a couple of my friends when a woman my mother's age sat down next to me at our table and started rambling about how beautiful she thought my face was. I was weirded out but flattered until she asked me if she could touch my face. She claimed to be a sculptor. She said it would help her recreate my face for an art piece she was doing. I told her no, but she proceeded to grope my face anyway. My friends bursted out in hysterical laughter as I was trying to get her off of me. Suddenly she started violently licking my nose and face. This is when a waiter pulled her off of me and dragged her out of the restaurant. She waited for me outside in her car, took a picture of me when I left the restaurant over an hour later, and quickly drove off. This happened 5 years ago when I was 19. After I work, I often go to this small store, 20-minute drive from my house. Never had I ever had a conversation with anybody except for the store clerk, or had anybody ask about me. But this time around, the clerk told me a couple, a male and a female, had been asking for my address after I was there last time, because I had forgotten to give it to them before. She showed their faces from the security camera, but I didn't recognize any of them, and I thanked her for not sharing my information. I just went home after that, maybe a bit confused, but I didn't think much about it. I had in my mind, maybe they've seen my car. I have a modified classic car that some people have asked to take pictures with before. A couple weeks after that, I saw them at the store. I just walked past them and didn't say a word to them. But they watched me do my basic shopping, food and other necessities. I thought if they asked about me to the clerk, why wouldn't they have come to talk to me? But they just stared and then left the store. I went outside, checked if they were there, but the lot was empty except for my car. So I got in my car and began to drive home. After a while, I noticed that a car was following me from near the store, and I just thought that I was being paranoid. Like it couldn't have been them. I went home and the car drove past my house. The next morning, I was leaving for work and I found a letter in my windshield. There was nothing written on it. This happened every day for the next week, and my neighbor hadn't seen anything or anyone, so I decided to buy a security system. I installed it and saw a male putting a letter on my windshield, but he took it right off after he noticed the camera. Later the same week, I was driving back home from work and a car passed me and began brake checking me. I immediately stopped to the side of the road, and that it was the couple. They got out of their car. The male began walking towards my car. He seemed aggressive, so I kicked the gas and drove off, because I hadn't done anything to piss him off and I just wanted to get home safe. The next week I was at the store. They were outside near their car, and I went up to talk to them. I asked what they wanted and why they wanted to talk to me, and about the side of the road and the empty letters. He said that my rear light wasn't working. I knew he was lying. My car has indicators if there was a broken light. About the letters, he told me that he didn't know anything about it, even though I literally saw him putting it on my car. After that, I saw them following me around the city, and a few times I saw him outside my gate or looking over my fence, almost always outside of the camera's range. Where I live, you can't point the camera outside of your yard. Even to a public road, it's illegal, so it is kind of easy for him to avoid it. One Saturday night around 2 a.m., I was at my friend's house when we were watching a movie, and I got a notification from my camera, and it was the couple. They were in my yard. I called the police and my friend and I left back to my place. When we and the officers arrived, they weren't there anymore. I gave the police the camera tape, and the couple didn't look familiar to them. I never saw or heard anything about them again. But I have wondered sometimes, what did I do to make him angry? And what were their intentions towards me? So creepy couple, let's not meet. This was 2004 when I was 20 and living in a small 2-level apartment on the main floor of a building. Out front there were 3 stairs, then a deck, then 3 more stairs to the front door, and another little narrow deck that ran the length of the front of my apartment, which besides the door was all windows. The main floor was a tiny kitchen living room, and a door to the hallway for laundry and parking access, all of which is totally visible from the windows. It was fall in Western Canada during daylight savings, pitch black early, and surprisingly warm for the season. I had all my windows open and had closed the blinds as to get a breeze in, and was talking on the phone to my sister. I had my back to the windows, and when I turned around I saw something weird at the window. It was really bright inside, so I turned the lights off and see a man pressed against the window staring at me. I screamed and told my sister a man was on my deck looking at me. He seemed to take off into the darkness. I turned off all the lights inside, put the outside ones on, and I was babbling to my sister like, holy shit, you peeping Tom. So scary, I can't believe. And then he just walks back up to the deck. I screamed again, he's back, I have to call 911. Hung up and did. While his face was pressed against the window, and it was still open. Windows were floor to ceiling with screened, cracked open bottom sections that I had opened to the max and could for sure accommodate a determined person crawling in. He could hear me in the 911 call, but he didn't move. I had crouched down in the dark room and the main light was off, so he couldn't see me. But I had the lights on beside the door to the hallway and on the stairs to the bedroom. I didn't want to move and let him know where I was. I should have ran into the hall and banged on the neighbor's door, but I was in shock. And after all, the cops are coming from the station 10 blocks away. They'll get her soon, right? 911 operator, we can't find your address. I'm directly behind the rec center at X and Y. Corner unit, unmistakable area landmark, and the only apartment building there. The man at the window starts banging on the glass. I was whispering but assumed he heard me, giving panicked directions repeatedly, and we both couldn't hear sirens. I felt like this could go on forever when he finally just ran off. I couldn't see far, and there were plenty of places to crouch and hide, so I was not all sure. I peek out to see a police car, so I told the operator they're here. And then the car starts to drive away, and the operator told me to go outside and flag them down. I don't know why I actually did, because I was scared shitless. But when I did, they rolled down their window. Ma'am, do you need help? Oh, you're looking for me, I think? I called 911. We are just driving by, but what's the problem? They never found the man that terrified me and made me feel so unsafe that I moved. But it was truly the cops not being able to find the only apartment behind a notable building that completely shook me. The frightening end note is when I moved out, they tried to charge me because the downstairs screen had been shredded from my cat. The screens were pristine the day the creeper showed up, and that was the last time I opened the downstairs window or blinds, or used the front door. The property manager laughed and mocked me, called bullshit when I said somebody had cut them until I showed her the police report. She lived there too, so suddenly not so funny. It was very common for me to be home alone at night, as I only lived with my dad, and his shifts would constantly shift from days to nights. This happened around the time my dad was doing the night shift. I would stay up really late on these nights, watching movies. It's always taken me a long time to fall asleep, so after I turned off the TV to go to sleep, I'd probably lay around for a good half hour. Then, I heard a toy fall over in my toy closet. It was nothing too suspicious, but it still creeped me out. But then the doorknob to my closet started to wiggle, until finally unlocking the door. I hid under my covers, not making a sound. It was strangely quiet for a good 2 minutes, so I finally peeked my head out of the covers. There was a figure standing next to my bed looking down at me. I screamed at the top of my lungs and began hugging the wall behind me. The figure looked out the window, then just walked away out of the room. I stayed in that position for like an hour before checking if he was really gone. The front door was left wide open, so it seemed he had left. I didn't get a minute of sleep that night. There used to be this pond about a half a mile away from my old house that I would commonly go fishing in. It was nicknamed Daryl's Pond. I still have no idea who Daryl was or why it was called that, but nobody owned it. So once in the blue moon, people would go fishing there as well. It was usually me by myself though. I had dug a hole into the ground where I would tie a noose to and from my small kayak. I'd say it was about 3 in the afternoon when I rode into the middle of the lake, a sweet spot for getting a decent catch. There was another person coming out of the trees. I waved at him and gave him a smile. He hopped into a small boat floating on the edge of the pond and began rowing over to me. As he got close enough where trying to speak to him wouldn't come off as obnoxious, I gave him a friendly, "Perfect day, isn't it?" "Yes, absolutely," he said. He didn't say anything after that, and I started to feel a bit awkward, as if I was obligated to keep some kind of conversation rolling now. "So, you come out and throw some line?" I asked. "No, I don't actually fish." "Oh, well, it's never a bad day to relax in the pond," I said. He continued to row closer to me until his boat collided with mine, making a big thud. I was generally uncomfortable now. I didn't feel threatened, just weirded out. I was only 24 years old, and this guy looked like he was in his late 40s or 50s. There was an awkward silence. I acted as if I was focused on trying to make a catch, but by now that wasn't even on my mind. This guy was weird. I didn't know what he wanted, and I was uncomfortable being so close to him. I felt him looking at me, or at least in my general direction, as I faced halfway to the opposite direction of him. I took a quick glance to my right. Yeah, he was staring at me. I decided to be ballsy and lock eyes with him. After about 4 seconds, he looked away. "So, where are you from?" I asked him. "Up there." He pointed behind himself in the direction of a woodsy hill leading past the dirt road. "Oh, you live by Suffolk?" I asked. No, I'm not," he said. "What made you decide to come out here?" I said. "Why not?" I continued to try and uncomfortably fill the awkward silences that kept coming up. His responses were dry. He didn't contribute to anything that was barely a conversation. He just sat there, not doing anything, with half a smile on his face, looking either at me or in my general direction throughout. I was creeped out. My heart was racing at this point. I'd go as far as saying I was nervous for my life. We were surrounded by woods in all directions in the middle of a pond. I started to row a bit closer to land, but in a very low-key kind of way, trying to play it off as I was just trying to find a better spot to catch some fish. I was horrified when I saw him following me. What a great day, huh? I felt the shakiness in my voice. I get close enough to the edge of the pond when I finally tell the man, "I think I'm gonna call it a day." I turned to see his reaction. He was still staring at me, but the smile was gone now. "I can't let you leave," he said. He lifted his flannel to expose a handgun sticking out of his pants pocket. As soon as I processed what I was looking at, I dove out of the boat for land. Ran the whole half-mile uphill through the woods back to my house, locking every door and window as soon as I made it in the house. I pulled down the blinds to the dining room window, leaving it open just a crack for peeking outside undetected. It started to get dark out, and I left all the lights off, still peeking out to the front yard, making sure I wasn't followed. The time came, I eventually decided I wasn't followed. I realize now, like you, that not calling the police immediately was a huge mistake. I kept my bedroom window open to let the room air out. My bedroom was on the second floor, so I wasn't worried about being watched through the window. About a half an hour after shutting the lights off and falling under the covers, I heard the sound of leaves crunching outside. I sat up to hear it more clearly. There was definitely something out there walking around. Normally I would assume it was a deer or a bear, but after what just happened, I was still in paranoia mode. I sat up as still as a statue except for my shaking out of fear, waiting as the sound of the steps stopped. "Hey buddy, are you up there? Are you trying to sleep? Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you." I felt like 100 pounds just dropped directly onto my chest. It was the same voice. I knew it right away. I didn't make a sound. I crept out of the room, quietly downstairs to the kitchen, and grabbed the phone, practically crawling on my way out to avoid being seen through the open blinds. I called 911, like I should have earlier, in the temporary safety of my bedroom. I made sure to whisper into the phone, as I was still hoping he had not yet heard or spotted me. 20 minutes felt like an hour as I sat behind my bed, waiting for the police to arrive in the constant fear that I would hear glass breaking from downstairs, or a thud on my back door, or even the voice again from down below my window outside. The police did a thorough investigation of the property and nearby woods, turning up nothing. They suggested I stayed with a friend or family for a few days. And so I did. I never heard from or saw the man again, but I still moved a month later. I couldn't deal with the constant fear or paranoia of being watched through my windows. I felt more comfortable fishing out by the bay now. Working the night shift always sucked. I work in an office building and would constantly do the night shifts, since it's the only time it would work out for me. I'm just about the only person on the floor that I worked on, possibly in the whole building. There would always be this kind of eerie feeling to being in such a big building, with most of the lights out and absolutely no one around. But on the upside, it was peaceful and less stressful and I got a lot of work done. There was this one night though. It was a Friday night, around 2 in the morning. I was typing away at my keyboard when I heard a noise from outside of my cubicle. It sounded just like a random crack from the walls or something. It's unusual in this building, but I didn't get too concerned about it. I resumed typing away, and once again interrupted by a sound. This time, the sound of a computer starting up. It caught me off guard. I was sure no one else was working the night shift. I stood up on my chair to get a view over the cubicle walls. The glare of a computer screen in the dark was visible from a cubicle on the opposite side of the room. Then I did something stupid, something I regret. I asked if anyone was there in a yell, hoping to get an answer from a fellow employee, but instead I saw the glaring light of the computer monitor turn off. And there was once again nothing but darkness on that side of the room. I started getting nervous. I turned off the lamp and computer screen so I wouldn't give away my position to whoever that was. I crouched down and tiptoed across to a nearby cubicle. There was just utter silence. I sat there waiting for something to happen for God knows how long, but I eventually decided the coast was clear. I tiptoed down past all the cubicles until I was by an opening near the exit door to the stairs and elevator, and that's when I realized that my fearful suspicions were true. There was a man crouched down behind a plant in the corner of the room dressed in all black. I felt my heart sink as I noticed him, but it didn't seem like he knew that I noticed him. I turned back to the stairway door. There was no way I was going to wait for the elevator and take a chance. I casually opened the door and closed it behind me, proceeding to walk down the stairs. After making it down about 2 flights of stairs, I heard the door above me push open aggressively, followed by manic, echoing footsteps coming fast down the stairs. I raced down the stairs, running as fast as I could, all the while the footsteps above me were getting louder. I finally made it to the first floor, raced through the lobby, and out the front door. Whoever was in there didn't follow me. I immediately called the cops along with my boss. My boss said that there was no one scheduled to work except for me. The cops scanned the place top to bottom, but there was no one in there. I couldn't help them out with any description other than that he was wearing all black. I did continue to do the night shift for a week after that, with my boss allowing me to lock all possible entrances to the floor, including the elevators, but I still wasn't comfortable with it. So, ever since, I've been doing the day shifts. This incident just happened a few hours earlier, and I'm typing this story currently at my workplace. I work in the garden area of a home improvement store. I don't work the cash registers, and my manager doesn't even let me water the plants a lot of the time. I have nothing to do. This resulted in me taking extremely long bathroom breaks, where I could just scroll through my phone. I know it sounds bad, but it's better than standing around trying to look busy. Today was the same as the other days, with me wasting time in the bathroom. Nothing of interest happened until my work phone buzzed at the same time as the stall next to mine. This becomes important later. A few seconds later, I see the guy in the stall next to me who had his hand stretched to the ground with his palm facing up. I at first thought he had run out of toilet paper and was asking for mine. He just stayed silent for a while, so I ignored him after that. Then he started moving his hand uncomfortably close to my leg. I immediately scooted away and prepared to leave. Once the man noticed that, he hurriedly got out of his stall before I could leave. Another few seconds of silence. I peeked out the gap of the stall door to see what the hell he was doing. And just like a scene of a horror movie, our eyes connected. He was barely an inch away from the door, trying to peek inside. My blood ran cold. If you're wondering why I didn't immediately open the door to cuss the guy out, I really hate confrontations. I avoid it whenever possible, and I do my best to not draw attention to myself. I stood sideways by the door so he wouldn't be able to see me. That's when the whispering started. I don't know what the first thing he said was, but it sounded like moaning. The next part was a bit more audible. He said something along the lines of wanting to see more of my unflushed toilet paper. I was thoroughly disgusted. This guy was a complete creep, and I was alone in the bathroom with him. My heart was beating faster by the second. I know I had to stay there until another person came in the bathroom. No way was I going to confront him alone. Probably a minute later, someone finally arrives, and I take this chance to wash my hands and get the hell out of there. Thankfully, the presence of the other person made the old man quit this creepy behavior. As I was about to leave, he blocked my path for a couple seconds before stepping aside. The weird thing was, I don't even think he was working at the store because he wasn't wearing any vests. My store is extremely lenient about uniform, but most workers at least wear the vest or something connected to the store. He just looked like a regular customer. I'm certain I heard 2 phone dings echo in the bathroom. The phones had a signature ring to them, and it couldn't have been a coincidence. Either way, he only started creeping on me once the phone rang and made it clear that I was an employee. The situation really creeped me out, and I've been totally unfocused on my work since. I kept prowling the garden area to look around for the old man wearing a similar outfit to the creeper. I have an incredibly hard time distinguishing faces, so I probably wouldn't even recognize him even if I did see him. Creepy bathroom peeper, let's not meet again.